Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Cindy Runger, president of Seattle Rotary, and I am happy to welcome you to our Wednesday Rotary meeting. So I'm looking forward to a great meeting today. We'll reveal our roster of board candidates. We'll have a short program on malaria and also hear from our guest speaker, Eric Liu, on citizen power. Because we have Joel Pageant. Joel, please don't sit down. Come on up for the inspiration.
Got too carried away talking to Mark. Sheesh. Got to get my glasses as well. It's one problem that comes with age. There are at least 3 ways to lead. From in the front, the leader who is usually ahead of his followers, using whatever means he can do to motivate them, challenge them, command them. There's no doubt who the leader is in this setup. He is the so-called charismatic type, often heroic, inspiring, infusing his followers with enthusiasm. Some lead from behind. They're the kingmakers, often conniving and coercing to achieve their goals. Building behind the scenes apparatus, which is not always apparent, often subversive. Difficult to discover this kind of leader. He has passion for anonymity, works in the shadows, pulling the strings, manipulating followers, and scheming. He is quite willing to use people and discard them when they are no longer of use. He can be ruthless as he drives from the rear. Third, there's some that lead from within. Like a playing coach or a manager, they become part of a team, require of themselves what they require of their mates. Their strategy is relationship, unity, love. They elevate leadership to its highest level. They lead by serving, deferring to their associates, always seeking the best for each one. Jesus said, "Let him that would be the greatest be the servant of all." May we go as Rotarians and do likewise.
At this point, I'd like to welcome past President Nancy Osborne for our short program, a special update on Rotary Malaria Partners. So please help me welcome Nancy.
Thank you, President Cindy. Today you're going to hear from Eric Liu that you are more powerful than you think. Eric's an inspiring speaker, so I know that you're going to leave the meeting today feeling very powerful. But I'm here to tell you, you are not only powerful and more powerful than you can imagine, but you have the capacity to be downright amazing. There are many challenges in our world today, and it's easy to be overcome by their enormity and to feel that you personally cannot make a difference. But you can. And in fact, you already have made many huge accomplishments, both individually and collectively. When we work together to combine and include the power of Rotary, positive change is inevitable. As a club, Seattle 4 celebrated our centennial 10 years ago. With a decade worth of new members, I've been asked to share a little history, which for many of us feel like it was just a few minutes ago, but it really was 10 years ago. Leading up to the actual centennial, we reviewed and celebrated 100 years of good works that changed the landscape, not only of Seattle, but of Rotary as well. Every club in this region, and many beyond, trace their roots back to Seattle 4, as do the first 2 international clubs, Manila and Shanghai, changing Rotary into Rotary International. These clubs were chartered in 1919. Think of the world at that time and appreciate the wisdom of our early leaders who connected us across the ocean. Our club changed the focus of Rotary. from business to service, and defined our work as service above self. 100 years later, service is central to Rotary, as seen in the back of this African Rotarian, proudly wearing our motto. When we celebrated our centennial, it was important to build on our past successes, but also to look to a project that would incorporate the power of Rotary, our innovation, our various skill sets, our resources, and our dedication to humanity. Coming in as president, I talked to many to get ideas of where our club could be a catalyst for a big impact on a major problem. To join clubs around the world working toward powerful solutions, and all the while building friendships as only Rotary can. It was our member, Bill Gates, who knew where we should go. And as I walked into his office, he announced, "Eradicate malaria." Easy task. Malaria is a huge problem. Malaria has killed more people than any other disease in the history of the world. Today, 425,000 people die each year, mostly children under the age of 5. Thousands of hours of productivity are lost to malaria, as well as cognitive ability in young children. For each time they succumb to the disease, they lose some of their cognitive powers. Bill knew how difficult malaria eradication would be, but he also knew that we needed to build on the lessons learned and the infrastructure from our polio work without letting go of those powerful connections. Bill also knew that through our network, we could connect all parts of the world, bringing the best of science to the smallest village in Africa. During our centennial celebration, we announced our project. We gave fair warning to the mosquito and said, malaria is going to end. Another bit of advice I got as I was leaving Bill's office was when he said, "Oh, Nancy, by the way, you just can't talk about malaria from the podium. You have to go. You have to go to Africa, see the challenges, meet the people, and feel the problem." I've got to be totally honest, Zambia was not on my bucket list, but I'm extremely grateful that I did go. It changed my life, and I encourage each and every one of you to take a Rotary trip, but you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. So off I went to Zambia. I saw the problems, I met the dedicated Rotarians, and knew that this problem was not too big for Rotary. Rotary in Africa is really very big. The local Rotarians are eager to remove this huge burden from their population and to help their economy through empowering their people. When I returned to Seattle, Rotarian Malaria Partners, RMP, was formed, and we launched our very first project with a single $5,000 grant from the Seattle Rotary Service Foundation. And it was matched by clubs and by Rotary so that the work began. Today we have 5 projects in Zambia along with projects in Tanzania and Uganda. The Ethiopian Minister of Health has also invited us to partner with malaria eradication in Ethiopia. We have raised $1.5 million, including matches from Rotary International, served over 350,000 people, saving countless from certain death and suffering. Rotarians work on the ground, hanging nets, testing and administering medication, and public education campaigns. We also enjoy fellowships with other travelers and local Rotarians. This picture is a group taken in April in Uganda at the headwaters of the Nile. Now that is a bucket list experience, so count on those types of things when you travel. But our work is not done, and this is where you get to show your power, your personal ability to solve a serious problem. The next several slides are of our goals and participation in our two campaigns with the Seattle Rotary Service Foundation and the Rotary Foundation. The Seattle Rotary Service Foundation is our local funding. It is the seed to numerous projects which have grown into life-changing and world-changing projects. Our funds from our local foundation are matched by the Rotary Foundation. So as you contribute to both, you are contributing significantly to all of our work. It is a requirement of membership to participate in these funds, but I'm asking you to not only fill those charts to 100%, but give more than the required minimum. It's the best investment you can ever make. Also, give of your treasure, but travel. Go on a Rotary trip, follow Bill Gates' advice, and visit a country and work alongside of Rotarians. It is life-changing. Also work in a local project. There is no shortage of need anywhere in the world today, and the personal reward is tremendous. Once you see our work in action, you will be a lifelong donor. It's just a simple win-win. Every time I travel to Africa, I bring home faces of beautiful children and struggling families. I wonder if they will have survived another malaria season. During the past 10 years, I have seen great progress and tremendous hope, but it is still hard. This 6-year-old girl, there you go, this 6-year-old girl was suffering from cerebral malaria when we were there in April. When our team visited her, we were stunned that she was receiving no medication. We asked and were told that her parents were trying to accumulate the funds necessary for her medication. We asked how much her medication was. It was $3. Immediately, she received her medication. But I wonder about those other children that weren't so lucky to have a visiting group of Rotarians at a time of need. In Africa, 3 out of 5 children die from malaria before they reach the age of 5. This is a photograph from last Christmas. It shows my 5 grandchildren. If we lived in Africa, 3 of those precious children would die before they reached the age of 5. But by the grace of God, they were born in this country. The cruelty of malaria is profound. The devastation can rob a continent of the next generation of strong leaders. While the task ahead is huge, we have made great strides, and there is much hope. In fact, Rotarian Malaria Partners just received word that our advocacy work and project execution has been given a huge boost for capacity building, investment, and by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This grant award will allow RMP to support a large scale-up of Rotary-funded malaria projects such as those already underway in Uganda and Zambia. This is really huge, and it started with a single donation, a single project, a small beginning, and look at where we've come in a decade. We will rid the world of malaria. It will be building on the work started here by you as individuals. Give big, give often, and feel the tremendous satisfaction of knowing that you have saved lives around the world.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for your leadership on malaria. And you heard Nancy, you can make a big impact. You can give, you can travel. So now, To introduce our main program is Jan Levy, who is retired as the Executive Director of Leadership Tomorrow. But even though she's retired, she's busier than ever. She just returned from Tucson, where she was canvassing and getting out the vote with common purpose. Please help me welcome Jan Levy.
Those of you who know me know that I like smart, eloquent people. Our speaker today is just such a person. I first met Eric Liu when he had been invited to moderate a discussion at Leadership Tomorrow. I'd never heard of him. I can't speak for him, but I was, as one would say, my socks were knocked off. It takes enormous skill to be a good moderator, and Eric was fantastic. Our paths have crossed several times since that early meeting. I fell in love with one of his books, Guiding Lights, which is the official book of the National Mentoring Month. Eric says the book is about extraordinary mentors. I say it's about servant leaders. Eric's also served as one of Leadership Tomorrow's keynote speakers at graduation. He was funny, and he was inspiring. He is always generous with his time and brilliant in his remarks. I am a big fan. Eric is the founder and CEO of Citizen University, which is a national nonprofit that promotes the art of powerful citizenship. He also directs the Aspen Institute's Citizenship and American Identity program. I mentioned his book, Guiding Lights. He's written a few others. They include 2 national bestsellers, The Gardens of Democracy and The True Patriot, The Accidental Asian, which is a New York Times notable book, and his most recent book, You're More Powerful Than You Think, A Citizen's Guide to Making Change Happen. Eric served as a White House speechwriter for Bill Clinton, and later as the President's Deputy Domestic Policy Advisor. He and his family live in Seattle. So today he's going to join us to share his thoughts on power and civic engagement and how to make change in the world. Please join me in giving a warm Seattle 4 welcome to my friend Eric Liu.
Thank you so much, Jan. I think most of you who know Jan Levy that if you look in the dictionary under the term servant leadership, there's a big old picture of Jan right there. She embodies that ethic. She has embodied it her entire professional career, but I would say more broadly her entire civic career, which, as we saw just from your election here, continues to this day. And so I know you all at Rotary are lucky to have Jan in your fold, and I think, speaking as a citizen of Seattle, we're all lucky to have Jan here. And I'm just really glad to be back at Rotary at Seattle 4 and to see several old friends, Paula Houston, who I've known since I first started going to the Meredith Matthews YMCA branch back when we were working out together there, Laura Rehrman, past president, with whom we've done some great work when she was at Group Health, and others of you. It's just really so wonderful to be in this space. And I want to tell you why, because as I'll describe in a little bit, our work at Citizen University, I didn't realize actually till we were watching the day unfold here and singing Lean On Me together, and even, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to touch this mallet, but even ringing the bell here. I didn't realize till I started experiencing this how much of even my 1 or 2 prior visits to Rotary over the course of the last decade had seeped into me and have actually influenced the way we do stuff at Citizen University. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but I just want to say that in ways even imperceptible, the very presence of this room, the rituals that you engage in, the sense of community and spirit that you have here is contagious and incredibly powerful. And one of the things that I want to add as well here, just by way of gratitude, is to recognize that Rotary International, Rotary Club in Seattle, Seattle 4 in particular, that this institution is something kind of remarkable. And I think those of you who are members, whether you're brand new or long-time members, you maybe start to overlook that fact. And I want to tell you, as somebody who comes in from the outside and has visited you only a couple times over the last few years, particularly in the age we live in right now, this age of toxic politics, this age of rampant dehumanization in civic life, this age of just automatic political partisan tribalism, that it is remarkable that we can have a room like this gathered not just for serious business, but for joy and in a spirit of play and in a spirit of love, but also, as Jan was saying, a spirit of servant leadership, a spirit of service. And I just want to name that because in the work that we do at Citizen University, which is work that is rooted here in Seattle and extends all across the United States, our mission is very simple. It is to spread the belief that democracy is on us. It's to remind folks that we have the power to make change happen and the responsibility to actually try. And that is a matter, in part, of practice and skills and know-how, but what it also is a matter of norms and values and a narrative. And I'm standing here in a room that is completely saturated with norms and values and narrative of purpose, right? It's in your slogan. It's on the back of that t-shirt we saw, service above self. It's in your four-way test. For those of you who are visitors or newcomers, the four-way test at Rotary for, I'm not sure if it's all human interaction, I'll extend it to that, but certainly for engagement in the context of Rotary. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Imagine if just, let's call it a tenth. Imagine if a tenth of our elected officials in the United States lived by the four-way test. Imagine the revolution of norms and practice. It's a powerful thing you're doing here. And our work at Citizen University in trying to spread this belief that democracy is on us and that we have the responsibility actually to build that culture of powerful, responsible, engaged citizenship is, like Rotary, operating on a theory of action that is locally rooted and yet networked around the country, in our case, and around the world, in yours. This idea of networked localism is, I think, one of the most important ideas for us to grab onto in this time. Right? So much of our attention is drawn to Washington, D.C., to the circus that is national politics. And so many of us are either watching in frustration or cheering what's happening or, but whatever it is, for the most part, we are spectators. That is bred in circuses, and we are in the stands. And what we have to recognize is that whether you like or dislike what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, the fact of the matter is that if we're going to renew democracy in this country, it's going to happen from the bottom up, from the middle out, and from the local outward. And what you are doing at Rotary International, at Seattle 4, is putting that idea into practice, taking vast concepts like service and servant leadership and participation and making them concrete and tactile here in the life of our community. And so I'm very inspired, and I feel very much a kinship here in being with you today. And I want to just describe to you a little bit of a framework that we bring to our work at Citizen University, and a framework that I think maybe will be useful as you go about the work that you do at Rotary. So I often, in thinking about citizenship, take pains to do a few things. In the first place, to define this idea of citizenship and citizen, even the word citizen in our organization's name, Citizen University. I'm not talking about documentation status under the immigration laws of the United States. I'm not talking about whether you have a passport or the proper papers. I'm talking about citizenship in a broader, more ethical sense, that deeper sense of being a member of the body, a contributor to community, a pro-social contributor to community. Right? When you look at it through that lens, you realize there are plenty of people in this country who do not have the papers but live like big citizens. And there are plenty of people who do have the papers and don't. And so it is this deeper ethical notion not only of, again, stated belief, but how we make those beliefs visible and palpable in the world by our deeds, bridging from creed to deed. And in our work at Citizen University, we have this very simple formula, this kind of mock equation for unpacking what it means to practice citizenship. And it goes like this: P plus CH equals CI. Sounds very quasi-scientific here, but let me make it accessible to you. P plus CH equals CI means this: power plus character equals citizenship. That if you want to be a big citizen in this broader ethical sense, you've got to have both a literacy in power, by which I mean an understanding of how you get stuff done, a knowledge of who decides what gets done, an understanding of various sources of power, whether it's people power, ideas power, state power, money power, the power of numbers, the power of force, a literacy and a fluency in the basic laws of power, the fact that power always compounds, such that if left to themselves, systems will result in the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, those with some clout getting more clout. Laws of power, like the fact that power is always justifying itself. Those in power, whether they are incumbent individuals or institutions, will spin elaborate narratives about why it ought to be that way, about why that is the God-given nature of things. Trickle-down economics, white supremacy, male supremacy. These are all wonderful fairy tales about why certain people should be running the show. And so literacy in power is super important. How do you know and see and puncture those kinds of narratives? And how do you actually then, having named and confronted the inequities of power in a community, how do you actually organize to confront those inequities? How do you generate brand new power out of thin air? That is the work that we try to do at Citizen University, taking these ideas and teaching them and putting them into the context of local challenges. In Seattle, it can be how we reckon with the incredible costs of our incredible boom. Not just homelessness, which will take a good long time to address and solve, but displacement, gentrification, things that are happening in slow motion, changing the face, the voice, the character of our community. Think more regionally than Seattle, and you think about the ways in which, now that Amazon has named its HQ2 and 2.5, whatever you want to call that process, how all the anxiety that was running and coursing through many of you in this room, business people, power brokers, about, oh my gosh, what should we do to placate Amazon? What should we do to do right by this great company that will allow prosperity to trickle down to the rest of us? That what we've got to do is to remember we're not just sitting here as passive recipients of someone's largesse. We are the creators of power. We are the creators of economic opportunity. We are the creators of inclusion and belonging if we are intentional about it. If the rest of this community were half as intentional as Rotary is about welcoming new folks into the fold, about telling a bigger story of us that's not just about scarcity and I've got mine, so step off, don't ask me to contribute. Because that is a narrative that is picking up steam in our city. And so literacy in power is a super important part of this conception of citizenship that we practice at our organization. But literacy in power alone, if all you have is a fluency in these laws of power, if all you know is how to move the system and move government and push influentials to get what you want, but that knowledge and skill is completely untethered to any moral sense, then all you are is a finely skilled sociopath. I don't even need to say it. We confront in our times right now, I will say it, we confront in our times right now, at every scale of civic life, a contagion of that kind of sociopathy. A contagion of self-justifying power that is about everything and winning, but nothing at all about values. And so if all you have is that literacy and power untethered to any moral core, then that is a great danger. And so you've got to couple that knowledge of power with a deep, deep grounding in character, in civic character. Now, when I say character, I'm not talking about individual virtue like perseverance or diligence, as important as things like that are. I'm talking about, well, again, I'm preaching to the converted here. I'm talking about what you all do. Certainly every meeting, but every day when you're in between Rotary meetings. I'm talking about character in the collective, how we live in public, how we see ourselves as woven into fabrics of relationship and obligation and mutuality. That kind of character, we're not just born knowing how to practice that. That kind of character must be cultivated. And it is cultivated through structures and institutions just like this. Now, conversely, if all you had was character and all you had was a finely honed moral sense, but you had no earthly idea how to get anything done in the world, you would just be a philosopher. You would just be navel-gazing and reading your own ethical code to yourself. It is the combination of these things, power plus character, that actually makes for citizenship. And as my exhibit A for this, I present to you Seattle for Rotary. Because when you think about what it means to become literate in power, one of the strategies that I talk about in my book about citizen power, I call Be Like Ben, by which I mean Benjamin Franklin. And the thing about Benjamin Franklin was, of all the other things that he was, founding father, innovator, scientist, and everything, Benjamin Franklin was an inveterate, nearly addicted, habitual club maker. The dude could not stop making clubs, right? Debate societies, tradesmen's groups, scientific groups, philosophical clubs. The club that became the first subscription library in the United States, the club that became the first post office, the club that ultimately became the academy that became the University of Pennsylvania. Right? Now, what is it about making clubs? Well, it's fun, it's convivial, it's purposeful, but there's something else here that maybe you have stopped paying attention to, and I want to name to you. The making of clubs makes power. This is one of the most powerful rooms in the city of Seattle. I don't know how many elected officials are here. I don't know how many people are CEOs. I don't know how many people's net worth is in the 1%. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the power of social capital that exists in this room to change norms, to move other people, to change the story of what we are meant to be and called to be as a city. This room, it's not even if, every time you decide to orient behind a cause, it can be a global cause like malaria eradication, it can be a local cause like the addressing of homelessness. Every time a room like this orients in one direction like that, you are generating brand new power where it did not exist before. And you are changing the equation of power in our city and community. Every social movement that has lasted, civil rights, abolition, women's suffrage, has its origins in the making of clubs. Just like this, clubs. And so one of the things that I think is super important for us to remember is that because you know this and you do this, and because I am preaching to the converted, your responsibility now is not to walk out here and say, man, Eric Liu made me feel really good about myself. Your responsibility now, having been preached to as the converted, is to go forth and convert others. And I'm not talking only about to Rotary. I'm talking about to the habit of the heart that sustains democracy that is called club making. Teach others what you know about how to form rituals, about how to create common purpose, about how to invite newcomers in, about how to create gatherings that have a mix of work and play. And then as you do that, take stock of your own power, your money power, your people power, your ideas power, the whole of it. Because once you take stock of that power, you come to a very simple ethical choice. You look at that mound of power that each of you individually, each table here, and this room as a collective, once you take stock of that mound of power, you face this simple choice, which is, shall I hoard or shall I circulate? That's it. That is the whole of civic life. Shall I hoard or shall I circulate? And so when it comes to character, the ways in which you all are putting into practice what I'm preaching here is that you begin with a mindset of circulation. You exist because you want to circulate. But you don't circulate willy-nilly. You circulate with a creed in a way that is animated by a thought-through set of values. Service above self, your four-way test. At Citizen University, our creed can be boiled down to a few simple precepts. Number one, we're all better off when we're all better off. That may sound like a tautology, but actually think about that. That runs quite against the grain of what's going on in society right now, in our city right now, which says, I'm better off if I get more for myself. We're all better off when we're all better off. Number two, society becomes how you behave. Again, that seems common sense, and yet again, that is contrary to the dominant message we get in American life, which says, I should be able to do whatever the heck I want, as long as I'm not actively hurting somebody else. Wrong. Society becomes how you behave reminds us that your choice to be courteous or discourteous, civil or uncivil, compassionate or not compassionate, is not just your personal individual choice, it is the spark of a contagion. It is setting off a cascade of similar such choices about what's okay, what's normal. And then third, our final precept in our creed, our civic creed, is this. And again, it's more painfully palpable to us every day living in Seattle. It's a slogan that I saw one day on a billboard by a completely congested highway outside of Portland, actually. And the billboard said this, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. Yes? We're not stuck in broken politics. We are broken politics. We're not stuck in a culture of mistrust. We are a culture of mistrust. We're not stuck in a I'll get mine and damn the consequences environment. We are that, unless we are actively forming clubs, organizing activities, and creating a culture in which we change that narrative. And so I want to close with this, because this song of praise I've just sung to Rotary and the ways in which you both practice power and cultivate character in the work that you do, we've got to work together. Citizen University and Rotary, we've got to work together. But more broadly, there's an entire ecosystem of organizations in our community and in our country that are trying to shift our culture of citizenship. And every one of you has to take on this responsibility now of setting off this new constructive and positive civic contagion. And I want to do my part here by extending an invitation to you. I mentioned at the outset that when I was watching the beginning of this meeting, I felt right at home. My colleague, Kayla DeMonte, who's our program director at Citizen University, we were looking at each other as soon as you put up the lyrics to Lean On Me, and you had the Rotary Rogues up here. Because one of the programs we run at Citizen University is called Civic Saturdays. And I want to invite you to this, because what Civic Saturdays are these regular gatherings that started here in Seattle in 2016 and now have spread all around the United States. Sometimes we lead them, other times people who we've trained in something called a civic seminary, they go forth and lead them. But what Civic Saturday is a gathering that is essentially a civic analog to a faith gathering. It's not a faith gathering, it's not church or mosque or synagogue, but what it is about the American creed, about this notion of American civic religion, that the only thing that holds us together in this room and in this country, in this nation that is not a nation, no matter how many people in power today want to say it is, a nation based on ethnic identity, a nation based on blood or white nationalism. It is not a nation based on a single faith. It is a nation based only on a set of ideals of liberty, equality, equal justice under law. It is a nation based on the preamble to the Constitution, a nation based on the Gettysburg Address, a nation based on Susan B. Anthony's speech at her trial for the crime of attempted voting, a nation based on Justice Jackson's dissent in Korematsu versus the United States, a dissent that stands and looms larger every day, not just because we know today how wrong Japanese-American internment was, but we know too how wrong the abuse and persecution of Muslim Americans is today. It is a creed based on these values that we have inherited and must sustain. And Civic Saturdays are gathering that run not just like a faith gathering, but it occurs to me they run like a Rotary meeting. We come together and we sing a song. We are led in song, actually. It is a sing-along. We turn to our neighbors and strangers next to us and talk about a common question, a prompt. There are readings of texts that you might think of as civic scripture. texts like the ones I just named. There's a civic sermon that if it's in Seattle, I'll give the sermon. If it's somewhere else, one of the people we've trained will give that sermon. And then after that sermon, what happens is what happens right here at Rotary. People form up in circles and talk about what they can do together to be servant leaders in our community. So I want to invite you to be part of our community, to join us at our next Civic Saturday, which will be in Seattle, December 8th in Pioneer Square at the Impact Hub building. And we'll share information with the leadership here. But even beyond December 8th, we just want to invite you in general to come play with us, to come create with us, and to together fashion the foundation for a civic renewal in this country. Our obligation here is not only to enjoy each other's company here and to know that, for those of you who are members of Rotary, to know that you have this frame of membership and belonging. Our obligation is to show others that it is possible to join this frame and to have a frame like this and to have an experience like this. Maybe some of them will join Rotary. Maybe some of them won't. But they all ought to have the great good fortune to taste just a little bit of what you taste every week here at Rotary, which is purposeful belonging, servant leadership, and powerful citizenship. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'd like to end with a Chinese proverb. Talk does not cook rice. Talk does not cook rice. Not only is this a good cooking tip, but it's also a great life lesson. As many people spend their lives complaining or saying, what they want to accomplish, but they don't actually do it. And Rotarians, we are powerful. We are people of action. We take action to make an impact. And we heard two powerful examples today of cooking rice. Nancy's update, and she said, with malaria, you can't just talk about malaria. And Eric's talk on citizen power, you have the power to make things happen and the responsibility to try. I feel fortunate to be part of this powerful group of people, Seattle Rotarians, who don't just talk, but also cook rice together. So, yes, take this with you as a reminder today of how powerful you are as you live, learn, and lead. See you in 2 weeks, everybody.